Good afternoon. We're just letting people into the room and we'll begin in about 1 minute's time.
All right.
Just a couple more coming in, then we'll get underway. Hello and a very warm welcome to this UK-ABC Roundtable Partner Conversation with His Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary-General for ASEAN Economic Community at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. The aim of today is to introduce the UK-ASEAN Business Council and our partners, as well as to hear from His Excellency on his priorities for ASEAN's economic integration. Leading the conversation today will be Baroness Neville-Rolfe, Chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council based in London. Before we begin, I'm Alan Lai in Bandar Seri Begawan and have a couple of notes to highlight before we begin. Firstly, these sessions are at their best when we hear from you and when we can see you. So please do turn on your videos, and to ask a question or to make a statement, please raise your Zoom hand and introduce yourself and your organization. To raise your Zoom hand, click on participants and you'll see the options at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. And secondly, looking ahead, we are hosting Dr. Rachel Glenister, the Chief Economist at the FCDO this Wednesday to discuss green finance, carbon border adjustment taxes, fintech and energy transition, amongst others. Do join us if you have not already signed up. And now let's begin. Baroness Neville-Rolfe, the former business minister and board director, is now an active peer in the House of Lords and drives greater engagement with Southeast Asia as chair of the UK-ABC. Over to you, Baroness, for your opening remarks and to lead the conversation with DSG Singh.
Alan, thank you very much and welcome everybody. It's a great honor to be hosting you, Your Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary-General of the ASEAN Economic Community. And also thank you for your participation in the Race to Zero conference when we first met virtually. The Deputy Secretary-General is responsible for the delivery of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025. And of course, that aims for ASEAN to be an integrated and cohesive economic region, an objective which I very much share from my many years working within ASEAN. Your team have been working on the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, which seeks to pave a way out of the COVID crisis and a strong recovery. And of course, you bring great experience, an esteemed career, and most recent from Singapore, most recently as Assistant Chief Executive Officer of Trade, Connectivity and Business Services at Enterprise Singapore. And you've been championing enterprise development. So we're very lucky that you bring that wealth of experience and passion for business development to ASEAN in all its aspects, traditional and modern. We had the pleasure of hosting you at the Race to Zero dialogue session, and we're very, I'm sure some of the issues that are coming up there will come again today. You've asked to keep the session informal, which we really welcome, but if you could open with some brief remarks, then we can get questions coming in from our partners who perhaps I could remind to put their hand up so that I can make sure that they get a chance to answer their question, to ask their question. DSG Singh.
Thank you, Baron Neville-Rolfe. Thank you for your kind introduction, and definitely a delight to see you again. Looks like our life is going to be like this, virtual meetings henceforth. I'm waiting for the day where we all can travel and host events together in person. And I hope that day comes sooner than later. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity. And I think on the onset, straight away, I'd like to definitely recognize the UK-ABC. Definitely the private sector has truly been one of the central characters when you talk about economic integration. And truly the private sector is the one that truly plays an important role in supporting the full realization of what I call the AEC, which is the most important the economic integration document. Is almost like a path that ASEAN has chosen in order to to steer forward in our integration of the whole region. And again, I believe that the public and private sector engagement, especially through councils like yourselves, has been truly one of the key priorities and strategies in our effort to realize our integration. And again, you're right, we definitely have to work closer, and there's so much to do, especially in the acceleration, the recovery from the pandemic. And therefore, the initiatives and the active participation of the private sector to contribute ideas, to contribute expertise to the recovery is definitely much appreciated by all of us in the Secretariat. I will also, at this early stage, also like to comment on the UK government's and the UKABC's active engagement in the area of, especially in the area of digital technology and trade. And this is regard to UK's engagement with the ASEAN BAC to support the regional Digital Trade Connect project, which aims, it's very interesting, it brings all of the national digital trade platforms in each of the ASEAN countries together, connected, so that at least amongst the governments, we can start sharing digital documents in a seamless way, in a much effective way. So that project has had very good support from the UKABC. I would also like to support the work that we've been doing in terms of our virtual webinars that we conducted together, where you have actually been very instrumental in bringing together the UK private sector to discuss on things like the master plan on ASEAN connectivity. And then you also had supported us into discussion on digital landscapes and how do we improve our connectivity in our part of the world. Where I want to go today is really talk a little bit about our priorities in trade and investment, if you allow me. And I will touch very briefly on those. And like you say, I would prefer to keep a lot more time for interaction with the members. So I'll look forward to the questions. But let me quickly talk very briefly about where we are. I'm sure all of you are familiar or may be familiar with the ASEAN Economic Blueprint 2025. That's the blueprint that actually sets the path for our integration and growth of our whole economy. And a very important part of that is really about ASEAN going global. In fact, it's a very key component of the ASEAN Economic Community and is being pursued quite actively on our part, as there are about 7 free trade agreements and comprehensive economic partnerships, which are in fact currently being negotiated, signed, or currently being ratified and being implemented. I like to highlight that basically that the character of the ASEAN free trade agreements have all kind of evolved over time. And I think in the past, people used to say that, oh, maybe our agreements are a little bit too trade tied and you're not looking beyond just trade of goods. But truly, some of the FTAs that have come, that includes the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that was signed in November last year. Again, that has come in a way where people are beginning to see how modern and how comprehensive that agreement is. As some of you may know, that is an agreement of the 10 ASEAN countries together with very important trading partners of China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and Korea. Now, that's an agreement that actually brings forth one of the largest FTAs in the world, with one of the most important dynamic regions in the world. And again, I think when somebody looks at those agreements, clearly you'll see that there's almost like a breath of fresh air, in terms of depth and even in terms of the breadth of what it covers. And again, I feel that the RCEP agreement is definitely going to be quite important to ASEAN. It's almost a remarkable milestone. And I would say that the way that the breadth it covers is going to be, it's touching things that never we have seen before, like government procurement, in fact, separate chapters on SMEs, temporary movement of natural persons, and even the way some of the agreements, I mean, the benefits are going to be structured in terms of market access, especially the ROO. It's going to be so modern that it will allow, in fact, this whole concept of global value chains to truly mature, hopefully in our region. You will see hopefully Japanese companies tapping on the whole ASEAN region in order to be globally competitive. Similarly, for Chinese companies, Australian companies, tapping on the strength of the whole region and partners in order to be globally competitive. Now, I think that's what we're looking forward to. In addition to that, I think we are hoping, that as we move forward and we are doing all the new FTAs, and hopefully one day, potentially with some of our new partners, Canada, EU, and even updating maybe our UK FTAs, I'm hoping that we will also all aim towards a similar goal of making ASEAN and our arrangements and our partnerships similarly very deep and comprehensive, and hopefully this will all benefit businesses on two sides. I think the important thing is about recovery, and I think this is where I think while there's a part where health security is important and a lot is being done, I think in terms of collaboration across UK and our part of the world in terms of your sharing and assistance when it comes to vaccine distribution in our part of the world, and even support in terms of capacity building. But I think while the region is recovering from COVID, I think we cannot ignore the economic side, the growth. And I think this is where the critical work that we're doing, I mean, this is not like, this is really hard work. I mean, the work that UKABC is embarked on, trade facilitation measures in terms of modernizing us, helping us to digitalize. Now, these is the kind of work that's going to go a very long way in ensuring that while we all are coming out of the recovery, that we all come out globally more competitive, more resilient, and we are all in a better shape in order to deal with the new normal. And I think this is where, of course, the work that is being done is really cross-cutting, and there's a lot of projects being undertaken in our part of the world and in that space. And if I may ask, one area where in future, as we are sitting down with UKABC, where we want to work together, I would say that besides connecting the governments and getting government documentation connected, the ASEAN single window way, I think one other thing that we probably have to do a lot more in trade digitalization would be to help all of us, especially the commercial contracts, the bills of ladings, the invoices that we see today. We need to digitalize them.
Yeah.
And I think this is where I clearly see UK's leadership in being able, on a hub-to-hub basis, being able to do a lot in helping to build that capacity and even helping our member states. Because I think the big issue is not about the technology. I think it's happening. I know ICC is working on a lot of the digitalization of those documents, but I think it's really about implementation and the ability for the ASEAN member countries to have their legal systems to recognize those documents. And I think only upon the ratification of legal appreciation and recognition of those digital documents will we move in that direction. I think that single transformation is really going to be one of the most important things for global growth. And I think it's going to bring about a huge amount of not just savings in costs and in terms of seamlessness in doing business, but it's going to bring about a huge amount of what I call competitiveness, global competitiveness to everyone, not just the large companies, but also SMEs. So I look forward to that leadership working quite closely with ABC down the road. If you allow me, I think my team actually, rather than talking, we actually have a very, very short video. I don't know whether Studio we have been able to share the video with Alan. It's a very short video that kind of shows where ASEAN is in terms of our economic AEC blueprint. It's only 1.5 minutes, but it captures exactly the so what. So where we are in the journey and what it means to businesses. I thought, Baroness, if you allow us, we would like to show the video.
The AEC Blueprint 2025 chart ASEAN Economic Integration Priorities from 2016 to 2025. As mandated in the blueprint, a midterm review was carried out to assess progress in the first 5 years, to identify gaps and lessons learned, and guide the way forward. The midterm performance of the blueprint is measured across its 5 broad aspirations or characteristics. namely to achieve a highly integrated and cohesive economy, a competitive, innovative and dynamic ASEAN, enhanced connectivity and sectoral cooperation, a resilient, inclusive, people-oriented and people-centered ASEAN, and a global ASEAN. The midterm review was a comprehensive and rigorous exercise involving assessment of the macro landscape, 23 sectoral work plans, 370 key performance indicators, surveys of 640 foreign and ASEAN businesses, over 400 external studies, and focus group discussions with 15 business councils and 17 research institutes. Out of more than 1,700 action lines across 5 characteristics, 54.1% have been completed, and 34.2% are ongoing. Between 2016 and 2020, several key outputs have been delivered across the AEC. Among them are the launch of the ASEAN Open Skies, adoption of the ASEAN Declaration on Innovation, adoption of NTM guidelines, ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan, operationalization of the ASEAN Single Window, signing of the ASEAN Agreement of Electronic Commerce, operationalization of ASEAN Customs Transit System, signing of the ASEAN Trade in Services Agreement, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. The progress of AEC is reflected across key performance indicators. ASEAN GDP has grown annually by more than 5% per year for the past 5 years. ASEAN, collectively, is now the 5th largest economy in the world. The average time to start a business in the region has generally shortened. ASEAN has become financially more inclusive. Digital connectivity has improved. And ASEAN is on a good track to meet its energy intensity reduction target set for 2025. Businesses surveyed stressed that to accelerate economic integration, improvements were needed in harmonization of standards and regulations, removal of non-tariff barriers, simplification of customs procedures, and tariff elimination. Half of foreign and ASEAN businesses indicated that they will increase investment in ASEAN over the next 5 years. Less than 4% of foreign businesses indicated they would reduce investment. This is motivated by a growing middle-class market, ease of doing business, infrastructure improvement, stable political and economic environment, and regional integration initiatives. The midterm review provides 12 recommendations across 3 themes. 1. Address overarching elements and cross-cutting issues. 2. Strengthen ASEAN centrality and resilience. And 3. Keep AEC inclusive and sustainable. Recommendations include to strengthen coordination, monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, elevate the ambition of sectoral cooperation, and strengthen stakeholder engagement. The midterm review has 5 key messages to guide us through the second phase of AEC 2025. While good progress has been made, more needs to be done. Improve response to cross-cutting issues. Embark on broader and more meaningful engagements. Use past lessons to inform future direction. Embrace and adapt to new developments and trends. In 2021, ASEAN begins the second phase of implementation of AEC 2025. The post-COVID-19 world will be one where digital transformation will be an indispensable growth strategy, where inclusion and sustainability will no longer be an option but an imperative, and where multilateralism and the spirit of partnership and cooperation must be upheld. By 2025, the AEC would have been in place for a decade. There will be wide expectations for meaningful economic integration in the ASEAN. ASEAN must do more, do faster, and do better. The ASEAN Economic Community, a shared vision by the ASEAN people for the ASEAN people.
thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share. I thought it was a very good way for us to begin our engagement, our conversations. Kind of gives the state of where ASEAN is today in terms of our goals, AAC 2025. I have a lot to say, but Chair, I'm leaving to you. Maybe we could start the conversation. It'd be a lot more interesting.
Well, look, thank you so much, A, for your comments, and B, for that terrific video, which I hope your staff will give us a link to, because I think it summarizes brilliantly and quickly what ASEAN's already achieved, and indeed what your objectives for the 5 years ahead, which are vital to our business members. So thank you so much for that. Could I perhaps start off the questioning? You mentioned the RCEP, which is obviously RCEP, sorry if I pronounced it wrong. And I'd be interested in the timing on that. I think you've said it's been signed and ratified, but when will it actually change life, I think would be a good question. And then obviously we're very interested in UK links to ASEAN, and the dialogues, move on dialogue status was extremely welcome to us and to our UK ministers. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that.
Sure. Let me share a little bit about where we are. I think while the agreement has been agreed and signed on November last year, where we are today is all of the 10 countries in ASEAN. It's an ASEAN-led initiative. So the ASEAN countries, together with our 5 partners, they all are going back to get it ratified. And I think as we speak today, I'm aware that Singapore, China, and I believe there are 1 or 2 more ASEAN countries that are in a very close to ratifying it and submitting their full submissions. What we need is basically 6 ASEAN members and 3 of our dialogue partners in the RCEP. And as long as we have that numbers, the entire agreement goes into full enforcement. And from the commitments that we have heard coming from both the 10 ASEAN countries, we are confident that we are going to get the 6 member states coming forward. And I'm clearly seeing Japan, I'm clearly seeing Korea, Japan, and China already actively making those submissions. So overall, I think we are in for a possibility of almost like a full ratification submissions, adequate ratification submissions coming through by November this year, and the implementation begins the first quarter of 2022. So it's really exciting because when I meet some of the CEOs in this region, I keep telling them, for God's sake, get your lawyers, get your people who understand policy to sit there and brief your board and yourselves on what's to come, because there's a huge amount of details in the agreement, and it's going to transform the way businesses are going to be organized. And I feel that this is where ASEAN as a region is going to benefit most. And why I'm excited for even UK businesses, because you are one of the largest investors in our part of the world. You've been here for a long time in many of the economies in this region. And I think this is also exciting for your businesses who are looking at, okay, how do we take advantage of this agreement? How do we use our presence in some of the member states in the ASEAN to then get more competitively into the markets of great interest, China, Japan, Korea. I mean, these are markets that as you will know very well, that they're not the easiest of markets of access. So this is truly an opportunity for UK businesses to look at ASEAN with in fact, a bigger competitive lens, and then potentially use this as an occasion to then plan your reorganization of some of your value chains that gets into full access into those markets of interest. But again, ASEAN itself is a huge market for UK businesses. So again, this is an opportunity to get into the big markets of Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, using this superstructure of the RCEP. So we all need to pay attention. I think even when I'm being briefed, Baroness, every time I'm being briefed, I'm picking up different salience, nuances of the agreement that is going to be truly attractive. So no shortcut. I think we all need to spend some time looking into what's coming and plan for it.
It is exciting, and we will help with the planning. What about the UK dialogue status, DSG Singh?
I think there's work already. I think there's good momentum. If you see, we have member states on our part. All of the 10 member states. I've sat through some of those discussions. I think I've not heard one single disagreement on including UK actively. And I think now it's really the work of our officials, to quickly get the momentum going and getting our bilateral agreement up and running. So I guess we all are busy. This is busy times on two sides, but I think prioritization is needed, and the region is excited with UK coming on board. UK is an important trade and investment partner for us. So I don't see there's going to be any entanglements of any sort. But I think what would be important is it'll be wonderful if the spirit of our engagement also has the breadth and depth of what we see in some of the modern agreements that ASEAN has gotten into. So that will be potentially the hope. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. No, we very much agree, and we hope your officials will put the work up the priority list, because it is very important. I'd like to bring in Mark Garnier, if I might. Mark is the Prime Minister's trade envoy for Brunei, which of course has the ASEAN leadership at the moment, for Thailand and for Myanmar. Mark.
Lucy, thank you. And DSG Singh, thank you very much indeed for that incredibly helpful presentation. I've got really a couple of questions, one of which is a sort of your views of what the future is of Myanmar. Obviously, what we've seen is a sort of massive reversal of huge progress over the last few years, and possibly Myanmar going back to sort of in the wilderness that we've seen for the last sort of overall 50 years. And actually, is there anything that that ASEAN can do in terms of trying to get some sort of normalcy back there? The other question I was going to ask you was perhaps a slightly more philosophical question. And Lucy sort of raised it with the UK trying to get seeking dialogue partnership with ASEAN. But I was rather wondering what your views were of how the UK is doing now that it's come out of the European Union. I don't know how closely you're following the debates in the UK, but you may have seen that we've now signed this Australian trade deal. But actually it's creating quite a lot of friction amongst our farmers who are worried about Australian beef coming in. And I was wondering if you, just how you look at this. Are we grasping global Britain and our openness in the way that everybody was expecting? Or are there perhaps signs that we haven't quite, in certain areas, haven't quite got the hang of what global Britain really looks like? DSG Singh, perhaps you could mark our homework in the first sort of few months of us being independent from the European Union. I'd be very interested to hear what you've got to say about that.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. Those are both very interesting questions, but let me touch a little bit on the Myanmar issue first. It's a very difficult issue, as you highlighted, and I think everybody agreed. And there's one thing we must all agree, that it's not going to be something that's going to be resolved overnight. I think we all are in a hurry to have this sorted out, and we said, let's all move on with our lives with Myanmar in ASEAN, and everything will be fine. But it's not a fairy tale. So it's quite a very complex situation internally in Myanmar. And the two sides, believe it or not, believe that they all are equally right. So, and they equally need to share, if anything, the end resolution. They also believe that they have the right in terms of influence and power. So it's not an easy situation. And for most part of it, the people of Myanmar are going to decide on it. I think it's a lot less of what ASEAN can do and what the rest of the world can do. As the people of Myanmar have to make a big move in terms of deciding where the country goes next. But that, notwithstanding that, I think ASEAN has also not stepped behind. I think we have been in the front in terms of giving support to Myanmar, ensuring that whatever it needs in order to at least bring about stability and security and safety as a situation. I think we are prioritizing that commitment from Myanmar current regime that's in charge. I think at least when the ask from the ASEAN leaders when they met in April, the regime has agreed that they will work towards it. And they are also open to the idea of having independent envoys being sent with agreement on both sides, and where eventually there will be engagement of all parties to see where the future looks like, what future lies for Myanmar. But again, I just want to caution everyone, including media and private sector, this is not something that's going to be happening overnight. It takes a long while, But meanwhile, at the same time, it's really going to be quite hurting for the people of Myanmar if the rest of the world disengages economically with Myanmar, and definitely not in the space of aid, and also in terms of capacity building that Myanmar needs. I think that's a space where I think ASEAN will continue to ensure that we will support the people of Myanmar and give whatever aid and capacity building support that the country needs in order to keep on its momentum for growth. But as we all know, I think the economy of Myanmar has suffered quite a lot. It is going to end the year, may not be double digit, but definitely up to 8-9% of negative growth. So there is severe impact. This is all causing to the economy. And what I can say is that we all have to just take a deep breath, everyone, and let ourselves know that this is something in making, and it's not something the rest of the world from the outside can do very much. I mean, we can do our best in terms of encouragement and provide resources and offer ideas of how we can come in to help neutralize. But like I said, most of it depends on the people of Myanmar. Yeah. So maybe a change of tack on the issue about UK's globalization and its role, the new UK, the new norm. I think, honestly, we all look forward to that. We all look forward to the time where I think even on the bilateral basis, each of the ASEAN member states are quite keen. And I think some of them have already reached out and want to do bilateral FTAs with you. And I suspect that will be the priorities of what's going to happen, at least for the next 1-2 years. But definitely it shouldn't stop UK from working on more of a regional agreement also with all of us at some point. And that's like I said, most of the ASEAN member states are keen and interested in the UK economy, and there's so much that we can collaborate with, and I'm sure the UK economy is also keen to engage Asia, and like I said, in the new world, and where we need to do business with one another, despite whatever tensions there are between the Chinese or the Americans, I think there's still a lot of space for us, both the UK and the ASEAN, to collaborate and do things together and be competitively relevant to both the United States and China. So in that space alone, I can see a huge amount of collaborative space where your private sector can truly take advantage of the ecosystem that's coming out in the ASEAN in order for you to do business increasingly with China. So I would say it's positive, and we just hope naturally you will have those stresses back home, I can imagine, of being open, and of course agriculture is always a space where it's always sensitive, right? So I truly appreciate that, but I think beyond that, I think we cannot forget the new sectors, especially the digital sectors, the banking sectors, the services. That's a space where I can imagine, any important infrastructure initiative in our part of the world, the legal work, the accounting work, the financing and the structuring, most likely than not, will be taken out by the professional ecosystem of the United Kingdom. So there's huge amount of what I call opportunities. If they are not taken up, I think it'll be a deep loss. So while there might be certain sensitive sectors that may or may not have openness in terms of connecting to our part of the world, but I think we may start with those sectors that may benefit more. So we don't have to pull everybody in immediately, but definitely those sectors that that's going to benefit, especially in the area of services. I think this is where I think UK will have a lot of value in terms of connecting with us.
Thank you very much for that. I want to just encourage my business members to come in with some questions. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask George Thompson, who is the Deputy Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner in Singapore, to comment and perhaps, George, give a bit of a feel for some of the issues that, you know, that you're experiencing day to day. I actually thought what the Deputy Secretary-General was saying about contract conditions and commercial contracts and trying to digitalize those was incredibly interesting, because certainly he's right, that will make things more competitive, and it should be easier for trade and investment if you could do more digitally. So that's a very exciting prospect. But George, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Baroness Dobrov, and thank you also, Deputy Secretary-General Singh. Well, it's been really interesting what we've heard so far, and I would agree with you that digitisation is actually, you know, one of the themes that just continues to come up again and again in terms of sort of discussions around future regulation. For those of you who aren't aware, the Department of International Trade, my department, launched the Digital Trade Network, which is a pilot program over 3 years, and it's about a year in across Asia Pacific, and we've introduced some new roles in within ASEAN markets in our diplomatic network as a result of that. So a very sort of innovative pilot scheme. One of the very concrete outcomes to come from that is we're scoping a digital economy agreement with Singapore, which would build on the existing free trade agreement we have with Singapore, and obviously Singapore has similar digital agreements with Australia, New Zealand, and Chile. So that's a first for the UK, and it shows how within ASEAN there are natural partners for this kind of innovative trade policy, and that's something we'd like to increase in the future. We're also working with Area on looking at ASEAN UK supply chains, and that's more in the sort of traditional goods sectors, but certainly digital supply chains is something we think about more and more often in our sort of regulatory engagement, including with ASEAN. In terms of sort of what else we see in the region, obviously RCEP's been mentioned a lot, and it's a really, really exciting regional deal, and something that sort of, you hear this phrase, cleaning up the noodle bowl of all the different FTAs that previously existed within the region, and I think that's no bad thing. And you know, the political achievement of bringing Japan and South Korea and China into this one FTA is really, really, really significant, and something that you know, a lot of people credit ASEAN with doing a lot of the hard work on. Obviously, the UK has declared its interest in CPTPP, and you know, recently progressed the talks on our session there. So that's something we're very excited about. And you know, we mentioned digital. That's because CPTPP is possibly the most sort of forward-leaning or liberalizing FTA around at the moment on digital. And you know, there are 4 ASEAN members within the deal so far. 2 have ratified, and we'd certainly be intrigued to see if other ASEAN members came forward to join that deal as well. So that's, in terms of our priorities for the region, that's one of the biggest. We've been working with ASEC very, very closely on the UK's ASEAN dialogue partner status, and that's been a really, really welcome relationship. So just to thank you, DSG, on the sort of collaboration that your team demonstrate with us week after week is really, really welcome, and it feels like a ripe area for the UK and ASEAN. I'll stop there.
Yeah, George, thank you very much. DSG Singh, would you like to come in on CTPPP, perhaps?
Yeah, so as what George mentioned, some of the ASEAN member states are in the CTPP already. There are 4 of them, and 2 have ratified, 2 are in the process of ratifying it. So I suspect, okay, whether more ASEAN members are going to join CTPP, honestly, at this stage, I think, if you ask me in terms of priorities, I think most of the member states of ASEAN are truly looking at RCEP. They are truly focused at RCEP full ratification and implementation. But I mean, who knows? At this stage, I can't share which new member states looking at CTPP, but definitely, if you ask me, I don't see any doubt of 4 members of ASEAN ratifying their CTPP complications. I think that will come. But moving forward, I think what's more important is what George mentioned, the digitalization bit is key. And I see that as also essential, especially as we all are embarking on areas of looking at how do we decarbonize our economies and how do we move forward in terms of being accountable in the decarbonization process. Once again, I see that entire space of digitalization as being key because we need to audit, we need to track and trace, we need to take account of our carbon footprints before we can even tell the world that we are recovering and we are doing well in utilizing carbon. So it's a huge space of collaboration again, where I think the work done in the UK will be incredibly valuable for us. So again, a space for UKABC to also pay a little bit more attention moving forward, because that entire space of decarbonization it's coming quick and fast. I think the heat is coming, right? With COP26. I mean, UK is hosting it this year, so I think you guys know it better than me on how the pressures are going to be there for us and for the private sector to transform itself. And I think that's going to be important. But like I said, we are so far behind in our trade digitalization. I still can't believe that for even the largest companies in the world, they all have to depend on these huge volumes of paper documentations to move from one location to another. And I hear horror stories of ships arriving in the ports 20 days waiting for documents to arrive. So can you imagine the inefficiencies, the cost of capital that is stuck with that inefficiency? So definitely that's my spiel, the next couple of years, as I'm hoping to work in ASEAN. I truly want to move forward in working with the private sector and the International Chamber of Commerce to truly move us in terms of private contracts into the digital space. And again, we can't do that without the member countries, without trading partners like yourselves, all pushing hard to get our governments to ratify and recognize digital documentation. Yeah. That's the crux.
I mean, I so agree. And it's something we must certainly come back to you on, because people aren't commenting today, which may reflect the particular people who have come on to today's call. But we've very much taken that message away. DSG Singh. I've got Guy Drew Drury from the Confederation of British Industry who'd like to pose a question, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much indeed to the UKABC for this invitation. I'm based in Beijing, but have responsibility for Southeast Asia. And I read with interest the recent review, the Southeast Asia IP Business Sentiment Survey that came out in March. And if I may, DSG Singh, I wonder if you could share with us some comments on IP, just to highlight that over 59% of businesses said that a lack of enforcement of IP in ASEAN was sort of preventing them from investing and doing business. And that 62% of businesses have taken no steps to engage lawyers or protect their IP. So very, very grateful again for the invitation, but would any comments and reflections on IP enforcement that of course goes hand in hand with digitization? Thank you very much.
I think, you just brought up a very critical area and space where we definitely can do better. I don't claim that ASEAN and the member states have done well especially in the space of enforcement. I think there's a will, there's a commitment that IP is important. And I think even as you look in even our ASEAN economies of Indonesia, our own local, especially the new economies, there's some of the large conglomerates are also setting up a base here. For them, IP is also extremely important as they are stepping out of their own national home base and moving into the regional economies in order to do business. So I think that realization, the importance of IP protection and the need to do more, I think the realization is well accepted and the commitments are there. But I think when it comes to enforceability, I think this is where the issues are constantly real issues. And I think it's not about lack of enforcement, but truly, there is capacity issues in each of the member states. Even when you look at some of the IP regulatory bodies in each of the member states, I mean, even the bodies, physical bodies, definitely materially, there's not enough for them to enforcement. And then when you even look down to even their case studies of how do you manage IP law, IP enforcement cases in their courts, I think again there's always truly a lack of what I call the case histories, so and experiences of the judiciary. So I think there are a lot of capacity issues in each of these spaces where we definitely need to work a lot harder. And again, we do welcome the support and help from dialogue partners like the UK government to also help some of our member states in this space. And they want to help themselves, but again, they need help. They need the ability for them to be effective. They need resources. They also need capacities and training for even their judiciary there in order to be able to deal with IP enforcement. Definitely enforcement, more can be done, no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Very reassuring to hear that. Thank you very much indeed. As a past IP minister, I wanted to just move on to Cambodia. Cambodia obviously are taking over the leadership of ASEAN. I saw the ambassador here in London last week, who was very warm about the relationship with you and the plans that they were working on. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, as it were, the next year as you see it. And if you could touch on the comprehensive recovery framework, I think that would be useful to our members because of COVID, and also obviously on green finance and COP26, because the environment is, being highlighted this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Baroness. Let me just touch a little bit of background on the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. In fact, this was the framework, kind of a living agreement document of commitment between the ASEAN member states that was to guide the region to overcome COVID-19, but also to bring about resilience of recovery. In fact, I must say that all the sectoral bodies have started working on, in fact, full implementation of the programs identified in the, I call it the framework, the ACRF framework. In fact, the early harvest initiatives, let me share some of them. One of them was the MOU on, very interestingly, the implementation of a non-tariff measures on essential goods. In fact, this is where, because of the COVID and the need for seamless flow of especially essential goods of health, medical products, even we are talking about food and agriculture products. This is where I think there's an agreement among the member countries. MOUs were signed about 152 essential products being adopted into the plan. Again, that was very important. There's also a deep influence of all this into the strengthening of our supply chain connectivity in response to the pandemic. The other thing was, of course, what's really critical in this period is the essential ability of the essential travel at least across our borders. And I think this is where there was an ASEAN declaration on the ASEAN Travel Corridor Arrangement Framework, which actually looks at harmonizing rules and protocols for the ease of travel, not of tourism yet, but I think we're talking truly at this stage of essential travel in the region. And there's a lot of progress being done over there. And I think we have also gone ahead to even engage IATA and looking at incorporating some of IATA's protocols in our potential agreement, which is a fantastic outcome. Actually, we can all aim for. I mean, the last thing businesses want 101 different systems and protocols out there as they cross borders. So I think that was very positive. And of course, finally, all the health ministers have they all have adopted a regional strategic action plan on ASEAN vaccine security and self-reliance. It's all centered in the space of how do we ensure, because we all kind of see that this pandemic is not going to go away so soon. I understand the new variants are creating havoc once again all over the world. So I think it's going to be quite a norm that we have to live with. So I think the ability for us now to be a lot more formalized and be prepared on what's to come, I think that's been all part and parcel of the framework. I also want to say that I think all of this all of this is actually very essential, but at the same time, as we move into all these urgent areas that we need to address, I think one thing we cannot deny the fact that I think we still need to continue in terms of making sure that trade and investment flourishes in our region, and we bring back business activities and we bring back investment to our region. Actually, just to give you a bit of insight, looking at our performances in the first 6 months of this year, at least the outlook on trade looks pretty stellar. I think for most economies besides Myanmar, I think there has been growth almost for most of them. The growth has even been larger than pre-COVID. So in the space of trade, I think the ASEAN region continues to done well, and I think we will continue to do well. But in the space of investments, I think this is where we could do better. And we have lost about a third of our investments because of COVID, and that's why there's this huge momentum and openness for us to move forward, to reach out to our trading partners, and we want to see more of our partners coming in, tapping our ecosystem and bringing fresh investments to our region. And not only in the traditional sectors, but also in the fast-growing, important new sectors, the ICT sectors, the biosciences, in all those areas where, even in areas like sustainability areas, even recycling areas, I think these are going to be the sectors where definitely the UK businesses are going to be able to get into many new demand that is arising in our region. So look forward to seeing UK businesses playing a much larger role in all of our ASEAN countries.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that sense of direction. Probably our last question is from Natasha Shu, who is from the City UK. Natasha.
Hi, thank you very much, DSG Singh. Those are some really useful comments. I was wondering, the City UK, we represent the UK financial and related professional services industry. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on ASEAN's sustainable finance agenda for this year, and including how you expect green and sustainability to feature as part of the COVID recovery.
Yeah, so in fact, sustainability, thanks Natasha for that question. Sustainability is actually part and parcel of our framework too. So right alongside when the leaders were deciding on recovery from COVID, the two things that have not fallen out, in fact, they are playing a much larger role, is digitalization and the movement towards sustainability. So right on the dot, I think that's going to be part and parcel. And I think a space where definitely where ASEAN is moving very actively is in the area of financing. And I think this is where internally within ASEAN, we are at the stage of building out almost like a taxonomy on sustainable financing. I think sustainability is such a broad word today. It still have different nuances for different parts of the world. So we are in ASEAN hoping to harmonize and the appreciation and commitment towards sustainability in a consolidated way. So work is actually started quite actively on building that taxonomy. But at the same time, I think the hope is that when we settle down on this taxonomy of sustainability, we also hope the financial sector doesn't leave out sectors inevitably that will suffer. It has to be something inclusive. It has to take into account our own needs. For example, ASEAN has huge amount of needs in terms of energy transition. Now, we are not all going towards renewables in the next 50 years. It's a journey, right? So it's a journey of our commitment towards wanting to do more renewals. But definitely, there's a huge interest in ASEAN to move towards transiting and improving cleaner energy solutions across the various spectrum of energy sources, be it gas, be it even clean coal, even in areas like all the new renewables. And the idea being that, of course, the hope is that once this taxonomy and this guidance of how the financial sector should be investing in some of these sectors, we hope that there will be some inclusivity in some of the good steps forward. because the practical reality is that the world cannot survive without some of these fossil sources, right? Even down past 2050, that's the reality. So we want them to move towards a transition or towards cleaner energy solutions and more efficient solutions, but we can't do that without the participation of the financial sector. If the financial sector is then told not to do the support, is kind of discouraged from getting involved, and there's like total carve-outs happening in the space of fossil fuels, I think it would be very detrimental to the world, because the reality is no region in the world can survive without fossil energy, at least from now to 2050. Okay, it's part and parcel. Okay, of course, the percentages will go down, but we can't live without them. So can you imagine if there's no financing in those sectors, the cost of energy to us in the next 3 to 5 years, I don't know how the private sector is going to survive that. Okay, because nobody's going to invest into clean solutions, nobody's going to invest into new explorations, and all that is, the burden is going to fall on the consumer at the end of the day.
Well, thank you for that. I think you're right. There is a wake-up call there, and the whole issue of sustainability and how we have a transition that makes economic sense is one we're very interested in. And of course, we talked at that roundtable on the race to zero. Is there anything you'd like to say finally to our members before I briefly sum up?
Bernice, of course, a big appreciation for UKABC for their help. I think we can definitely, I'm hoping that my engagement today kinds of opens up conversation, and we can identify fresh areas of engagement. I think we have always been effective. In fact, last 3 years has been highly productive. I truly, on behalf of my secretariat, want to thank so many of you out there who have been part and parcel of so many initiatives and it's involved in capacity building and supporting the region. But I'm also hoping that there are so many more new areas that we could collaborate for the betterment of access, for the betterment of capacities for our private sectors on two sides. And by the way, it's not just the UK to ASEAN. I think there's a huge interest of the ASEAN private sector wanting to work with the UK and wanting to tap how UK's economy is connected in your part of the world. So, and you are anyway one of the largest recipients of ASEAN investment for the whole of Europe. So naturally, most of the ASEAN member states look upon the UK for entry into Europe. So that is not going to change without yourself being into the EU. So I think that's going to stay. A lot of our large conglomerates have set up their global European and even their American network offices in the UK. So again, like I said, this collaboration is on two-way. It's a two-way collaboration, and hope to see many more ideas coming out, especially in the new areas we talk about, the energy transition areas, sustainability, digitalization, especially in trade. I think this could be work forward for us to work together. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. And perhaps I could return the compliment. Thank you so much for working with us so well. And we look forward to moving forward in these key areas. And thank you for your openness. I mean, just a couple of things I took away. ASEAN is going global, and we look forward to welcoming you all back to London, of course, and the whole of the UK once COVID allows. You don't give up on the economic side, you said, which was obviously music to our ears. But equally, you've got a very active plan, the Comprehensive Recovery Net Framework, looking about how you sort of do things post-COVID. And it was cheering to hear that trade and investment are actually increasing, and that you look forward to having good growth in ASEAN this year, which I think all of our members will be very pleased for. And then thank you for the video and for the link on the computer. And congratulations on what you've achieved with the AEC so far. I mean, 54% completed. As a businesswoman, I was delighted by that.
So you'll invest in us, right, Baroness? You will invest in us. Rate of return.
And things like, there's open skies and e-commerce and so on. It's obviously been great progress, but that means we've got to make more, particularly with our dialogue status. So we look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thanks for the questions. Thanks to UK-ASEAN Business Council team, for arranging this. And that ends today's session. Look forward to seeing you on Wednesday for the FCDO Chief Economist. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.